Cash contest. The 4 o'clock keyword is win. W-I-N. Go to KFAN.com. Make the keyword win.
All right, we indeed are joined in studio by Aaron Gleeman, who will continue apparently to cover the Minnesota Twins. We'll get into the his big decision. We'll get into eventually probably some Wolves stuff, too, if you have questions, 646-86. So you announced today via X and elsewhere, I don't know what else you do, however, whatever platforms you're on.
Everything, pretty much everything,
that the marriage between you and The Athletic is over.
Yes.
And it sounds like for you it was as simple, it doesn't sound... Well, I'll let you speak for yourself, but is it they were trying to force you out, or were they trying to say, no, we like you, we want you, but we do no longer want this level of coverage involving the Twins?
Yeah, it was the latter. They told me like a month ago, 2 weeks into the season, which was not great timing, that we want to pull you off Twins and have you do more like national stuff, news desk stuff, breaking news, that sort of thing. And... I talked it through what that job would look like, what the hours would look like, what, all that stuff. And I just kept coming back to the idea of that's not a bad job for someone or even me 15 years ago.
Right.
I loved working for The Athletic. Like I said, to Johnny K, it's true. And same thing about Russo. I loved being part of it. It was a dream job for me covering the Twins. But what I realized the last 3 or 4 weeks was, if you are removing the Twins element from it, for me at least, and maybe I'm nuts to think this about a losing team, it's no longer my dream job. And so what I told them ultimately was I would like to just leave, get out of I had a contract or whatever. Sure. I don't want to do the night news desk or breaking news. And that's, and also, what do you need me for that? That's sort of what I said. And it was a very frustrating process. And it's also, it's a risk. People in my life, my girlfriend and my podcast co-host, John Bonus, they both sort of hyped me up into doing this, but it is a big leap. It's a financial risk. It's a professional risk. It's a personal risk. It's a lot leaving The Athletic and the New York Times to, now if I'm at a party and someone says, what do? I say, I'm a baseball writer. They say, for what? I say,
for myself.
For AaronGleeman.com. And they'll be like, well, okay, yeah, fine. There's an embarrassing element of it too. But I just kept coming back to the idea of I've been doing this too long to just stick with a job to make a little money. And I don't want to do a job that I'm not passionate about, that I don't think I can be motivated to do. And I know after doing this for 20-something years, I'm motivated, I'm passionate, I think I'm good at it. I have an audience for the Twins. And so I just decided to kind of go all in and bet on myself.
Far be it from me to ever say anything snarky about Twins management and ownership. But can the argument be made that they, to a certain extent, are to blame? That part of the reason that folks at Athletic said, Gleeman, we love what you do, but it ain't worth it for us and the Twins because they're meaningless. Does that enter into this?
Maybe a little bit. Certainly if they were, back-to-back-to-back division champions or something like that, and they had gone to...
If they were more seriously viable, not even just winning, I'm not saying having to win World Series, but a team that most years, they're in the mix. They're going for things. They're in the playoffs, etc.
The sad part, though, is, in terms of they track every metric for readership and all that stuff, subscriptions and everything. Dan Hayes and I, who for the last 7 years have been the partners on the beat, we crush all goals. We get great reviews. I really think, maybe that's part of it. If they would have been very successful, it would have been viewed differently. But I also just think, from what I was told, it seemed to me on some level that someone high up in the New York Times or wherever basically said, why do we have 2 writers covering the Minnesota Twins of all teams? And just in general, they've scaled back their local coverage, not only MLB, but some other teams. I think they're at the point now where they're covering less than half the league, whereas even 5 years ago, they were covering like 3/4 of the league with a dedicated local beat writer. So that's part of it. They're going more big picture stuff like that. Like I said, I loved working there. I would have liked to stay, but once that door kind of closes to doing what I love and what I signed up to do and what I think I did well, then it's like, well, what is this job really if you remove that element from it.
So what do you foresee your role as changing when it's your deal?
Yeah.
Do you have to expand it in some ways? I don't mean write about other subjects, although maybe you are. I have no idea. But how do you go about saying, okay, I clearly this is I'm on the line here. This is my deal. This is my business. This is my livelihood. I have to maybe come up with some different ways, and I now have the freedom to do it, to branch out. Is there a way to broaden this or branch it out? Or is it still going to be pretty much all Twins, but maybe reinventing the wheel a little bit about what you give, the kind of coverage that you give?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to still be mostly Twins. I'm not naive enough to think people need my thoughts on everything, but occasional write about the Wolves.
Oh,
write
okay,
about, I know, a Chinese restaurant review.
Yeah.
There's just so much stuff that you can put out there.
Absolutely.
If there's any audience for it. And it's not like there's a space component. It's not like you're taking the space of everything else. And the independence brings creative freedom. There's also from like a, technological standpoint in terms of what I'm working with behind the scenes, I'm able to sort of customize things, or even I can do a live chat randomly during a game if I want. There's just all kinds of podcast, video, live chat components. And I am kind of excited about that. I can no longer, when confronted by the Twins about something I've written, claim my editor wrote that headline or my editor removed that out of the article. It's all on me. That's fine. I'll stand by it. So yeah, it's a little scary on that. There's a kind of a safety in filing a story to someone whose job is to make sure that the story is not horrible.
Yeah.
And right now, at least, I'm a one-man band. Maybe at some point, hopefully I'll hire an editor or something like that. It's also possible I could hire someone to write alongside me.
Sure.
At some point, if this thing goes pretty well. So it's exciting. It's a little scary because I don't like change generally. I was at The Athletic for 7 years. Before that, I was the editor-in-chief at Baseball Prospectus for 4 years. And before that, I was a senior writer at NBC for 13 years.
That long.
And I have been in a same relationship, unmarried, for 12 years. So I'm not someone who's looking to jump ship.
Yeah, right.
But I just think if it's a be pushed or jump situation, I'd rather jump.
Before I started writing, the first jobs I had in newspapers were as a copy editor and headline writer. So who knows? I may be looking for a little extra, We
can talk.
Although the problem I learned quickly when I did it, the old-fashioned computers that we used back then, these consoles in the newspaper office, there was a cursor, a button that you pushed, and it would basically, the cursor would go around each line like you're reading each word in the line, and you're pressing a button. And I noticed one day that about 12 paragraphs in, I had no recollection of actually reading for content and for grammar the first 12 graphs. It was one of those deals where I got on the paper to write, but the only job was copy editor. Yeah. So I'm not sure I'd be reliable. I might. In other words, there's a kind of self-hypnosis sometimes.
Oh, absolutely.
And you're probably looking for a real editor who's going to, help me out if I typos, grammar, this makes sense, whatever the case may be. So I might not be your answer.
Yeah, I mean, this is inside baseball, literally, but there's copy editors like you're describing where you file story to them and they clean it up and they get rid of typos. But there's also like editors where it's like, hey, what should I write about tomorrow? Let's talk through this. Right. I will miss that element of it, although I think they got away from that over the last few years. As, we mentioned, like Krasinski was talking about, when I started, it was really a feeling of, yes, it was the Athletic umbrella, but it was the Athletic Minnesota as its own standalone thing. And it was me and Hayes on Twins. And it was Chad Graff and Arif Hassan on Vikings. And it was Russo and then Krasinski. And we had Zach Pierce as our editor, who's now gone on to bigger things at The Athletic. And it really felt like we were a roster in and of itself.
That's true.
And we did kind of get away from that. It was still a great place to work, but I do miss those days.
So explain to people who want to get in on this, how the subscriptions work for you. I'll give you the free, obviously free plug, since we pay you so well for your appearances here.
I think I'm down money lifetime in coming to KFAN.
I think there's no doubt you probably are.
That's Yang Z's problem, not ours. And I think that's because of Yang Z, not our vending machine.
Couple Uber rides and a Yang Z, and I'm down lifetime coming here.
So give for people who say, you know what, I like Gleeman stuff. I don't want to lose connection with him. What do they do?
Yeah, so same in-depth, unfiltered Twins coverage. You'll get multiple articles a week. Also, I'll still be covering the team. I've talked to the Twins about this. I'm still in the BBWA. I'm still going to be in the press box, clubhouse.
Are they celebrating?
Well, I don't know about celebrating, but they were at least willing to go along with it for a while. So that stuff won't change. It's pretty simple. It's AaronGleeman.com now. Right now, it's just me writing. There's 4 articles up today. I'll have a new one tomorrow, new one the next day. If you just click anywhere on the site, subscribe, it's $8 a month or $75 for a year.
Okay.
And, $2 a week, it's going to end up being less than $1 an article, all that stuff. So if you've enjoyed me at The Athletic, or you just are a Twins fan and you want to support independent coverage of the team at a time when that is sort of shrinking overall, sign up for at least the monthly plan and give it a shot.
Can you speak to this larger issue that is important to you, but I think is important to a lot of people, especially those of us who've been in this industry in one form or another forever? For so long, newspapers, when they went online, they gave away their content, and then it was, oh my God, we gave away all this content, now we want to go back the other way, and people, they reject it. They just go, no, I'm not going to pay for that.
Because they got used to it.
Exactly. Yeah. Has it changed enough back where there's a greater number of people who say, it's a product. I shouldn't necessarily expect it to be free. In fact, I'm willing to pay a little bit. Are people, do they understand that, the general population, or is that still a big part of the challenge?
It's trickier. I would say it's become much more prevalent the last 3 to 5 years. I mean, we've learned that, John Bonus and I, with Gleeman and the Geek as a podcast, which is paywalled on patreon.com/Gleeman. When we first launched it in 2019, people were like, what is this? I got to pay you. And now it's like, okay. And it's, I think, similar to cable and satellite TV versus streaming. Mm-hmm. Now you just sign up for HBO and you pay whatever, $15 a month. And I think, it's a little bit tricky, but I also think my hope was, and the reaction this has gotten today has blown me away, and I think shows this. It's not just I'm asking someone to pay $8 a month for Twins coverage. I am, and I think you will get your money's worth. I do not take that lightly. But it's also, I think people who have been reading me or listening to me for years are like, we want him to keep doing this. We want him to make a living. Nobody's getting millionaire off this.
Correct.
And it's like there's a little bit of that and a little bit of the content itself. And I think people have just gotten much more used to it. And the reality is, if you want good, in-depth Twins writing, whether it's reporting, analysis, column writing, whatever it is, your options are going to cost money, whether it's a newspaper, whether it's a website. And so I'm just sort of throwing my hat in the ring and hoping that 20 plus years of doing this and my work and my reputation and stuff, it can sort of work on this and convince people to do it. And I got to tell you, I flipped the switch to put the site live at 3 a.m. And I woke up at 5:30, in a cold sweat basically. And I get an email every time someone subscribes. And by 5:30 a.m., I thought, oh, I'm going to be okay. And that...
Can you give us a number?
Well, my goal overall, longer term, 2 months from now, let's say, was to have 1,000 paying subscribers. And people can do the math on that. It's pretty easy.
Sure.
I, an hour ago, hit 1,000 paying subscribers.
That's outstanding.
Before the end of the first day. And so now I'm thinking, what more can we do with this thing? What can I bring in an editor? Can I bring in design people? Can I bring in another writer? Maybe we can turn this into something bigger. In the meantime, it just motivates me more to do good work and a lot of work.
So is this a compliment to you, or is it as well as that
That's a funny question
some sense of, despite the anger and frustration about the current condition of this team and ownership, that there's a lot more baseball fans who don't want to give up on the whole situation?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take any kind of compliment people want to throw me, but I do think that's part of it is no matter how bad a situation may be for a team in the short term, and I'm a lifelong Timberwolves fan, believe me, I know, but there are people who are into that team no matter what. It's ingrained in them. I'm one of these people with the Twins and the Wolves. Yeah. And if you're one of those people, you want good coverage of this team through good times and bad. And I started doing this in 2002 when I was in college. And I am old and balding. And, it's been a long time doing that. And we started the podcast over 15 years ago the first of 5 consecutive 90-loss seasons was when we started the podcast, and we were still able to grow it. So I have learned over the years that, yes, it would help if it was a bigger market, or it would help if the Twins were winning division titles every year, or it would even help if people didn't despise their ownership on some level. But also, if you are committed to doing a good job and covering it in a meaningful, true way, and analyzing it and giving opinions and not hot takes, which is really what I've tried to do, there's always going to be an audience for it. And the other reality is, I don't need 50,000 subscribers. My goal was 1,000. Now I'm at 1,000. I'm everything else is gravy. If I can get to 2,000, we can do some big things with this. And 2,000 people is not a lot of people, really, relatively.
Even in this, this is not as big a metro market as some place, but it's a decent population. Clayton from Rochester writes, this reminds me of when Russo needed 3 segments to talk about him leaving the paper for The Athletic. He made it sound like he was heading off for war, never to be seen again. The
independent content wars is what I'm entering into right now.
That's it, exactly. All right, let's get a bottom of the hour pause in. We will talk some Twins stuff. We got some good Twins questions coming in, and maybe other media questions that people have based on this big move you've made. Gleeman will be in studio till 5, and speaking of Russo, then he will join from the arena formerly known as the X to preview the Wild Game 4, trying to get to the exact same place that the Wolves got to last night, a potential pivotal Game 5 on the road. So we'll get to your questions and comments, and as I said, talk hockey at about 5 o'clock.
Things mean more, like last night. John Krasinski delivers. Great piece on Naz Reid today, by the way. Here at the Athletics Insider each week, all playoffs long, with Dan Barrero. He was on about an hour ago, thanks to RBC Wealth Management.
Did you tell me during the break that just since you came on at 4, we have helped you double your subscription total?
No.
Oh, a bit of an embellishment.
41, I just looked, because I get an email every time, which is sort of a weirdly thrilling thing to be like, this person has signed up. 41, since I got in the car to come over here, and I'm only 13 minutes away or whatever. 41 subscriptions.
That's a start. We'll get you some more before this is done. Dan, this is from Alan in Afton. Would you please ask Gleeman, who is a professional masochist liking the Twins and Wolves, why the passion for the Twins in baseball versus the Wolves in basketball? I'm sure you'll continue to be great, but baseball seems to this texter to be a dying sport compared to the other sports. What do you say to Alan in Afton?
Well, I like basketball maybe as a pure fan more than baseball at this point. But I think part of that is I've been writing about baseball for a living for 20 years, and any job becomes a job. It's a great job.
Yeah.
But, ask Krasinski how many times I text him some rube question about the lineup or whatever.
Yes.
And, I've written some Wolf stuff over the years, and John has actually tried to talk me into writing more over the years. And part of me's like, I could probably do an okay job with it, but also do I want to dip my toes in the water and ruin that as a fan?
Good point.
The sort of naivete of just enjoying it as an entertainment product and being so crazy into it. But I'll probably write some Wolf stuff at the new site. Why not?
I wouldn't. I don't see there'd be any reason why you wouldn't. You're going to dabble.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to help yourself at some point. Yeah. Why not?
Yeah.
To this point, what's the date today? Today is May 11.
Yeah.
Season started late April. No, I mean late March or early April, whenever it was. I don't even know.
Right at the quarter mark.
I mean, I'll tell you as an aside, at the end of Sunday sermons yesterday, I got a text from Laval, and he just had one word as a question, because he apparently had listened, and he just wrote, Twins? I think it was his way of saying you didn't even mention them in 2 hours yesterday, and I said, why? And I admit, I might be too bored with the club, but I can't help it. I can't get this notion that it's unfortunate that all the attention on the Wolves and the Wild and even the Frost at this point. We'll get to details on that developing story in a minute. That the Twins have a couple nice victories against Cleveland, and it gets overshadowed. And I'm going, it should be overshadowed. I'm sorry, it should be overshadowed. But your job is to follow.
Look at the lengths I had to go to get on this show, talk a little baseball. I had to resign from my job and launch an entirely new AaronGleeman.com website.
That's a fair point.
I'm willing to do it.
So to this point in the season, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever it is, the number one Twins story for you is what?
Well, that's interesting. I would say that the starting pitching has been better than expected. The lineup has maybe been slightly better than expected, but the bullpen and the defense have been so bad that it really undermines any ability to truly have a competitive season. They're 18-23, which is like a 90-loss pace. Now, the division is horrendous as usual.
Yeah.
And so they're only, 3 games out of first place or whatever it is, but they are the last place team in the AL Central. I think with a even below average bullpen rather than a league worst bullpen, they would probably be 3 games better and pretty close to 500 at that point. But it's also hard to sort of make that sort of excuse when everyone saw the bullpen as being the biggest possible weakness coming into the season. So it's played out kind of as expected.
All right, well, help me understand one thing, because I think you either wrote or tweeted or both about this, I want to say 2 weeks ago, in that range. And the grievance, I think, that you were registering was the bullpen stinks. Yeah. We kind of knew that was likely. But what was bothering you was that you're using people in the bullpen who realistically, even if they mature, can't be a part of the future.
Right.
In other words, if you're going to stink, the idea is to stink responsibly, and that's usually, all right, we got some arms that we like. They ain't ready. Right. We're going to throw them out there. They're going to take their lumps, but we might get somewhere with them. How is that explainable? If what you're saying is true, how does that make any sense?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the bullpen, after they traded away their 5 best relievers last July, and then the bullpen was horrible down the stretch, and it was largely the same as what you're discussing, which is they just kept throwing these 35-year-old scrap heap guys in there and just kind of placeholders.
Exactly.
And then they did nothing during the offseason. They signed, 35-year-old Taylor Rogers is back, and they brought in all kinds of, 35-plus soft-tossing guys. Liam Hendricks was in camp again, and it was...
Who have no chance to be a part of the future.
Right. And even now they've leaned in. They just called up a 39-year-old from AAA. And they're the type of guys that if you're building kind of what you're describing, which is at least get some young, live arms who maybe 2 years from now could be a part of a good bullpen.
Yes.
These are the type of veterans that you might want a couple of in that bullpen. You may be a lefty and a righty to be the mentors to stabilize it. But they built the whole bullpen out of that. And so they are the softest tossing bullpen in the league. They have one of the lowest strikeout rates in the league. And they also just have no one that you can point to as like, oh, yeah, he can handle a 7th, 8th, 9th inning role. And so what happens is now it's just, reliever roulette. Like they're just sort of throwing stuff against the wall. A guy who they got off waivers a week ago pitched all 3 games, Yoendrys Gomez, against Cleveland, and he saved the 3rd game. And it's like, this guy wasn't even in the organization a week ago. And like I said, the setup man for that was a 39-year-old Luis Garcia who had been cut by the Mets 2 weeks ago. So they're just like picking up scrap heap guys. And, bullpens are weird in that you can build them out of parts a lot of the times.
Right.
Quote unquote failed starters or injury guys, rehab projects, guy who learns a new pitch. It's not like a rotation. Something can click for 50 innings and a guy can be good. But they just have such little juice in the bullpen. And such little young, higher upside guys, they're leaning into it a little more with someone like Andrew Morris, or we saw Rojas during this Cleveland series. But for the most part, it's just the most veteran, soft-tossing, low strikeout. And I truly don't understand what the thought process was going into the season with that being the entire group. I get maybe 2-3 guys like that, but they have such little, juice to be had in the bullpen, and we've seen it play out. They probably even been worse than I expected, but I expected them to be pretty bad.
Texter, this is more to me than to you, 763 guy. Yeah, I get it, Dan. Baseball is not your main sport. Understandable. I don't dislike baseball. I grew up on baseball. I grew up on bad baseball in Chicago with the Cubs. But for me, it has more to do with the condition of this franchise. And a perfect example is what you just illustrated. It's mind-boggling to think that whatever the limitations are from a payroll standpoint, that there's not an attempt to do what we were talking about here to say, we might lose 100 games. But by God, given our circumstance, the best thing we think we can do is throw some people out there and grow with them and see. And like you said, there's nothing wrong with having a couple of mentors or a couple of veteran people.
But you can get higher upside veterans. And the thing about bullpens are, for $5 or $7 million, you can get a higher upside setup caliber guy. Their entire bullpen, I think, makes under $10 million for 8 guys at this point. So it was clearly a money-saving thing, too. But this kind of goes back to the question about, like, why do I want to take this risk and cover the Twins? I would obviously prefer the Twins to be good. But you can be compelling when you're bad, too, if you cover the team in the way that I hope to cover the team, and I have for decades now, which is, don't be afraid to say, the bullpen doesn't make any sense. It's bad. They did poorly here. Don't be afraid to talk about the payroll being cut or the poll ad situation or whatever the case may be. And when things go well, point that out. When there are bright spots, point that out too. But that's what I've tried to differentiate my coverage of. And it's gotten me in trouble with Twins officials over the years. That's fine. I'm sure that will continue to be the case. But that's, to me, the only honest way to cover a baseball team for 6 months, 162 games, with the ownership, front office, payroll situation that we're watching with the Twins. It can't be duckies and bunnies all the time. And you can't be afraid to lay it out bare when it's negative as well as positive.
612 guy writes, regarding subscription to websites like Gleeman, etc., I personally get annoyed with sites that are paid for, yet the user gets bombed with additional ads. I have no problem paying, but pick one way or the other. Pay, no ads, or don't pay and get ads. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I will tell you, when I first joined The Athletic, one of the big selling points of The Athletic was there are literally zero ads.
It's a great selling point.
And they started clawing back on that a little bit, and then when the New York Times took over, now they just have a normal amount of ads, possibly even more at this point, plus the subscription. I currently have no ads. I certainly do not envision having significant ads. It's possible we might have a presenting sponsor for that week.
Right.
Just all the content for this week is presented by, fill in the blank, but I don't think it would be intrusive at all.
No, that doesn't sound all that bad. Mike in New Richmond, can you ask Aaron if he knows Dane Moore, Wolves, Matthew Collar, Vikings? They did the same, going off on their own. They seem happy doing it. Good luck. That's Mike from New Richmond.
Dane Moore is probably, because I am such a big Wolves fan, I listen to his podcast religiously. I love when he has when he has Britt Robson on. I love when he has the other beat writers, Jace Frederick, Chris Hine, Kyle Thieg. He does such a great job, and that's a podcast versus written. But yes, that is a great example of someone who is clearly so good at covering it, but also so passionate about covering it that when he was let go from a writing gig, he just said, what if I just build my own thing? And as someone who's been consuming his content for a long time, it's better than ever. And that is something that at least I can aspire to, a year from now. My hope is someone who subscribes today to AaronGleeman.com, a year from now goes, not only was it good, I actually think it's better. That's kind of the goal.
Let's get another break in. I got more Twins to get to. I got some Timberwolves to get to as well. Gleeman in studio. Russo on Game 4, Minnesota Wild, which, of course, will immediately follow our program at 6:30. Russo will be at the top of the hour.
This is Bumper to Bumper with Dan.
One story that might well get lost as the Twins struggle, notwithstanding taking 2 in a row from Cleveland, is Buxton, right? So for those who have been casual in their Twins interest to this point, what can you tell us about the Byron Buxton run to this point? And to that end, I have several texts already asking the obvious, the assumption being, or the concern being, or maybe the desire being, let's just go ahead and do another fire sale, what the odds are that that's what we're leading up to.
So he hit like 180 with 0 homers through the first 14, 15 games, and his theory for that was he didn't really have a normal spring training because he played WBC, but then he got hurt in that, and also he essentially got benched in center field, and so I think he had like 10 at-bats.
Did he take that hard?
I don't think he minded that, but he just didn't get reps. And so then he comes back to camp, and he starts the season slow because he hadn't seen that much live pitching. That was his theory, at least. Now he's got 13 homers in his last 23 games. And, we saw Saturday night, hits a leadoff homer. The rest of the team gets no hit for 10 innings, and then he hits a game-winning double. That game, he had 2 hits, he drove in both runs, and the rest of the lineup was 0 for 30 with 15 strikeouts, and they win it was just the Byron Buxton show. The other thing is, he's played, I think, he started 38 out of 41 games, and that comes on the heels of 2 years ago, he topped 100 games for the first time in a long time. Last year he played, I think, 136, which was the second most of his career, and now he's on pace for like 150. There's not enough wood to knock on when it comes to Byron Buxton and injuries.
Yes.
And he's 32. He's maybe lost a half step in center field. He's still very fast, very good in center field, and I think he doesn't get fully appreciated as just a pure slugger because he doesn't look like a slugger, and he's so athletic. And when he first came up, people envisioned him as being one of these get on base, run, hit the ball on the ground, bunt. That's what Molitor tried to turn him into as manager initially. And now he's a guy who can hit 30, 40 homers if given, enough health for the season. So he's definitely been a big bright spot. Ryan Jeffers has been very good for them. Joe Ryan's been solid. Taj Bradley, who they got in a trade for Griffin Jacks last year, had been the biggest pitching bright spot. And then he's on the IL now with a pectoral muscle injury.
Is this going to be a long one or not? It doesn't have to be.
He was supposed to be getting an MRI today. They're off today, so they won't give an update. But it was a pectoral muscle inflammation, which is not bad, except I did look up 2 years ago when he was with Tampa Bay. He missed 2 months with a pectoral muscle strain, so that's a little bit more concern. But Mick Abel, who's another guy they got at the deadline, had pitched pretty well, and now he's on the IL. All that pitching depth, starting pitching depth that they talked about in spring training has basically vanished already.
Royce Lewis, give me, it's an ongoing soap opera. It feels like that. Where are we with his story now, and where are we headed?
It's just such a confusing situation. It's a difficult situation, too. I mean, he is struggling mightily offensively. It used to be with Lewis that the injuries were maddening, kind of like with Buxton, but that you could count on him playing at an elite level in between the injuries. Whenever he would come back, sometimes he'd homer off the IL. Well, now he's been relatively healthy now for a couple years. He hasn't been, the most healthy, but by his standards, certainly. And he's just struggling. He struggled in the second half of 2024. He struggled for most of last season, and now he's hitting, 170. They've been batting him at the bottom of the lineup essentially since opening day, which, is, I'm sure, a shock to his system. But he just has not produced. And I wonder in situations like this if the toll of endless injuries, the two blown out knees, but he's had all kinds of soft tissue and core muscle. He looks like an old, 26 or 27. And I just wonder at that point, like, is there a level that he can get back to, or has that sort of, has the gas tank itself shrunk so that you just can't fill it with as much gas anymore? And that would be the worry. He had a good big clutch hit versus Cleveland. He still makes some nice plays defensively, but this is definitely, I would say, not a make or break situation for his career as a whole, but I do think it's probably a make or break situation for his career with the Minnesota Twins.
Will your favorite basketball team shock the world, go to San Antonio Davey, win Game 5, come back here, and end this series in 6, a la ending the Denver series in 6 as well?
God, wouldn't that be? I would go to Game 6 in that scenario.
You'd have to, wouldn't you?
Yeah. No.
Place would be insane.
I think unless they can get Wemby kicked out again in San Antonio for Game 5, I do think there's a very real possibility they win Game 6 and force Game 7, which, as just not so much a Wolves fan, but a basketball fan, I will sign up for maximum Game 7s that I can get.
Absolutely.
San Antonio just seems tough to me. And the scary thing about San Antonio, imagine them 3 years from now, when Harper's like 23 instead of 20, and Wemby's added some muscle, and they're Castle, and they've maybe signed a free agent. Like, they seem to me almost like OKC was like 2 or 3 years ago, where they were close to elite, but also so scary for the future that I find them so difficult to beat. But as Johnny K was talking about with you, I was listening on my ride in, like, the Wolves, it can be a negative that they are so inconsistent and they sort of don't have eyes on the prize at all times. They lose games, they lose leads that are infuriating. But the flip side to that is, and we saw it against Denver a couple different years, they just all of a sudden click into place and just blow a team out. And that's what I'm kind of hoping for, if not in Game 5, at least in Game 6, and at least give yourself a chance for Game 7. This has been such a fun series to watch.
It has.
I would say, up until this last game, that I find San Antonio difficult to root against. But if you're going to start throwing elbows into people's necks, then it makes it a little bit easier.
Well, to me, the interesting element here is the Wolves are not a great shooting team, right? We know that. They're a streaky shooting team. But and I think San Antonio, their wing players are more consistent shooters. The numbers back that up as well as a group. But what you're looking for is a game where you're just unconscious. Because they really, I mentioned this to Guardsy earlier, Game 3 was absolutely winnable. Despite how brilliant Wemby was, they just couldn't hit a shot. And if they're streaky. Maybe if they've got two of the, what I call them the medium knockers, not the big knockers, end up having, each of them shoot like 9 for 14 or something like that. I honestly think it absolutely could happen, because against Wemby, you do have to hit some jump shots, obviously. You don't want to stop going to the hoop, but you got to hit some jump shots. And we're not a great jump shooting team, quite frankly. We're a streaky jump shooting team, above and beyond Anthony.
I do think...
And obviously DiVincenzo's out.
Yes, that hurts him for sure. I do think, and like Shannon's looked good, but he's not a shooter, really. So they've been hurt by that. I just think they need Julius Randle from the first half of the season. He was pretty frustrating in the second half, and in this series, I think he's been, they asked so much of him from a creation standpoint, especially when Ants is not in the game, and he's doing these spins and these up fakes and everything, and he's turning the ball over, or he's just taking these incredibly tough shots. When he makes it, it looks great. They need more from him. But here's the reality. The beauty of having a best player as good as Anthony Edwards, and, as a kid, I grew up loving KG. I never thought there'd be anybody close to KG. He's close to KG in a much different way.
Completely.
But not only is he one of the best players in the league, one of the most fun players in the league to watch, he is a true killer. And if he is getting healthier, or at least getting to a point where he is not severely limited by the knee, and I think we have seen that as the series has progressed since he's come back, he can just go off for 40, and you can win any game in that spot. When you have a top, 6 or 8 guy who is a killer like that, and it doesn't matter who's guarding him, and we've seen that at times during the series, that at least gives me a little faith where you don't necessarily have to be a better team up and down the roster, or even for 48 minutes. You just have to have the best guy for that day. And it's a tall order, literally, when Wemby's on the other side. But Anthony Edwards is capable of so much in these playoffs, and capable of just going nuts in a fourth quarter, as we've seen. And if they can get a little bit more help, I think, from Julius Randle in terms of being an initiator and a facilitator, and someone who can at least, bang a little bit inside and not turn the ball over, I do think they can at least take this to 7.
Julius Randle in this series thus far, 37% from the floor, 26.7% from
a lot
3.
of turnovers.
7.3 rebounds, which is okay. 1.8 assists, 4.5 turnovers.
Right.
That's not a good assist-turnover ratio, even if you're not a point guard. That's miserable, averaging 14 points. He has the ball in his hands
as if he's kind of a point forward a lot.
Yes.
And when he's playing well and they're thriving, he's getting 5, 6, 7 assists, and that just hasn't been there. And I don't think it's because guys are missing shots at the end of his assists. I think it's good defense, but also he's just sort of spinning himself into turnovers in the paint.
I'll leave you with this. I think Guardsy and I have fantasized about this before. I don't remember. My memory's not as good as it used to be. My math skills are worse than they used to be, and they were always pretty bad. In all honesty, Anthony Edwards is the player who was born to play with Kevin Garnett. Can you imagine talking about 2 ballers? You're talking about 2 guys who are killers. And we all know about KG, though. Despite the come fourth quarter bringing the ticket, he wasn't that guy. That wasn't what made him great. He influenced games. But instead of Steph Marbury, if you had Anthony Edwards in your backcourt and that mentality with KG, you tell me how good that would be.
I did think about that a few weeks ago when KG finally made his appearance, and then he sort of... Ant, I think, was sitting out that game in street clothes, and there was that viral clip of them sort of pointing at each other and then coming together, and I just thought, as someone who grew up idolizing Garnett and those Wolves teams, the flip teams, I mean, that would be incredible, because they do sort of remind me of each
100%.
other, not only from a personality standpoint, because they're both a little wacky, and they're both fun, but extraordinarily serious within that. And then we're also just talking about, 2 all-time great Hall of Fame level players. And I loved watching Garnett. I don't know that I will ever be able to say cleanly that there is a better Timberwolves player than Garnett, just because that's what I grew up with.
Your formative years, yes.
But you can't get a better, more fun, more exciting sort of someone that you want to jump on their back player than Anthony Edwards, and it's amazing to live in it. As someone who's been watching the Wolves for his whole life, it is amazing to live in a time where you can turn on a playoff game and go, they got the biggest killer on the court, and as we've seen the last 2.5 years now in the playoffs, they can beat teams that nobody gives them a chance to beat because of that.
He wants all of it. He may not always give it, but he wants all of it. We're late. Russo's bitter. You going to write maybe some hockey, too?
Sure, yeah.
AaronGleeman.com,
my theory on that, he never liked it, was why don't they get obese goalies? And he just thought that was so dumb every time I would bring it up.
I'll bring it up today. Thanks for coming in. Good luck on the new venture, and let me know how many subscriptions we sold for you.
I'll give you an update when I get home.
I appreciate that.
Thank you,
Aaron
guys.
Gleeman in studio. We'll talk again with him soon. How about some puck talk? Russo is already at the Moldy Fallness Studios. I hope the candles are working.